Welcome to Wilderness Horizons, where we live a cook, build, wild lifestyle. Today, chop, chuck, roast sandwich. But before we get started, let's grab a drink. Refreshing. Now let's get started with the chuck video. First off, we're going to flip the chuck roast over and check to inspect the silver skin side. We're definitely going to have to remove this so that way we have a tender cut. Take your time while removing the silver skin. You want to try and keep as much meat on the steak as possible. As you can probably tell, there's plenty of intramuscular fat in this cut of meat. We're going to go ahead and start removing some of these outside bits of fat so that way they're not too chewy when we go to cook it down. Now that we finished removing the silver skin and the extra fat, we're going to go ahead and rub this down with a homemade coffee rub. Now there's a common misconception with coffee rubs that people think that they're just made up entirely of coffee grounds, when in reality that's not the case. There's plenty of other ingredients that go into this as far as garlic, paprika, pepper, salt, and of course your instant ground coffee. I want to put a good base instruction list in the description below. You can always go off of this, or you could go to your local supermarket and buy a can of coffee rub. Traeger Grills makes a pretty good coffee rub for their red meats. Alright, time to place this on the Traeger. I've had this sitting at about 250 degrees for about 10 minutes now, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put both probes in the meat. We want to grab it from both sides so that way we make sure we're getting cooked the whole way through. Now the internal temperature on this, we're going to want to try and get to 203 degrees. However, we're going to pull this off and wrap it a little bit before then, adding some beef broth. Let's get back to the cutting board. As you can tell, I have two different types of onions here. We have your standard red onion and your standard yellow onion. These are going to turn into 4 different toppings for our chuck sandwich. This allows the carnivore several different toppings to choose from, imparting different flavors. We're going to take the red onion and cut it in half, and we'll use half of that for a pickled red onion. We'll also have raw red onion. Then we're going to take the yellow onion, have half of it into a grilled onion, as well as raw yellow onion. I chose to pull out the mandolin for the red onion so I had a uniform slicing thickness, so that way the brine could evenly penetrate all slices. Once I stuffed the red onions into the mason jar, I pulled out a simple pickling brine. The brine consists of some apple cider vinegar, sugar, and salt. We're going to try and apply this and make sure that it's thoroughly distributed through the jar. As you can tell, I cap it here and shake it to make sure that the liquid penetrates the whole way to the bottom. Then uncapping the mason jar and topping it off. Now this next section where we wrap the chuck is one of those areas to where I say, don't do as I do as I say. Now I struggled here when preparing this, and I'm going to leave it all visible so that way you can see. I got a little ahead of myself in the preparation, but boy does that chuck roast look beautiful. Now, unlike me, when you put the chuck roast on the foil, loosely wrap it in the aluminum foil prior to placing the beef broth in with the roast. What ends up happening next is just a complete and utter mess. Ultimately, I ended up losing all of this beef broth all over the cutting board and table, ultimately cutting a hole in the top of the foil while back on the Traeger and inserting more beef broth there. After correcting my mistake while the roast was on the smoker, I let it go at 250 degrees. Unfortunately, there was a time crunch, so I wasn't able to let it sit to 203 degrees internal temperature. For a pull-apart cut, you want to let this go to that 203 degrees. Unfortunately, I barely made it to 180, so this was going for the slicing board. After a few slices, we turn this into a nice chop. While we waited for everybody to get to the table, I did add more beef broth to the pan to allow these cuts to still soak up some more of this flavorful juice. Now time for assembly. Some King's Hawaiian rolls topped with a Kraft American cheese, some slices of pickle, some grilled onion I cooked off camera, the chuck roast itself, and then some of a sriracha mayonnaise mixture that is just heavenly. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as this tasted. Now, if you did like the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and feel free to always leave a comment. Thank you for enjoying Wilderness Horizons.